Very interesting. How many of you guys are familiar with the glycemic index? Can I get a like? Can I get a whoop whoop? Can I get something? How many people have heard of the glycemic index? How many people have heard of the glycemic load? Now, even though I'm going to share with you additional information about the glycemic index where I discredit it because I'm very clear that the glycemic index is not accurate, it is not science, and it just blows my mind when I meet people who feel they know a little bit about nutrition and they're real quick to talk about the glycemic index. Well, it's high on the glycemic index. Hey, it's low on the Come on, come on. If that's going to be your science, that tells me right now that you really don't know much about nutrition science. And it's time to get yourself educated. Okay. So I've talked about it many times. I'm going to talk about it one more time because the point really isn't to beat up on the glycemic index, but to share with you the difference between eating something that's whole and eating something that's processed. Because you hear people talk about, don't eat as much processed, kick back on the process. The process is the bad stuff. Well, if you buy anything, whether it's Ezekiel bread, they're all processed. There's a process, but there's levels of process. And there's a denaturing that takes place that makes it more, processed. Okay, so I'm going to share with you a basic little point. And then from that, I think it'll give you an idea on how to make the most of eating foods closer to nature because they're best on your overall health and they're ideal for helping you maximize your ability to lose weight and to feel great. All right. So what's up? All right. So here we go. I have one of my favorite things I like to eat, a green apple. Now it could be a red apple. It could be a yellow apple, but it's an apple. This is a whole food. If you're not familiar with whole foods, this is a whole food. I can go up to a tree and I can grab an apple off the tree, pull it down, and I can wash it and I can eat it, or I could just eat it. This is a whole food. Okay. Natural state. It's got structure to it. Okay. Structure. Now, apple juice used to be this. So the apple goes through the process and becomes juice. And now it's in this plastic thing or glass thing. All right. Now, if you go by the glycemic index, if that's all you go by, you will quickly discover that they're very close as far as how they impact your blood sugar. Keywords, your blood sugar, right? So they take 50 grams of apples when they did the testing, and they had a person eat these apples or this apple, and then, or the apples. And then as it breaks down and gets into the blood, they monitored for over 2 hours. And then they gave it a number in comparison to pure sugar, which is glucose. And so the apple gives the number 39. Okay. And it depends on the apple, but like 39. Then they had a person consume the apple like in this process. And this is given the number 40. So if this is 39, this is 40. Based on the glycemic index, they both are low, and there's no huge like scare tactic or concern based on the glycemic index on if I eat this or if I eat this. Okay. Now, let's go a little deep here just for a second. Okay. So I want to take you somewhere. When they created the glycemic index, all the focus was on how food impacts your glycemic profile, right? How fast it converts to becoming sugar in your blood. And then there's an association between the glucose in your blood and insulin, the hormone that gets spiked, right? So if the apple is at a 39 and this is at a 40, then that's considered low on the glycemic index. But there's something you want to know. When they took glucose, the same amount of glucose that they put into the mouth, and they measured the two, when they use an intravenous, when they injected the glucose right into the blood, the spike of insulin was very little. Let's say like this, okay? Very little. When they took the same amount of glucose orally, the spike was that big. See the difference? So you got this big, that big, the same amount. And they both eventually get into the blood. Think about that. Well, if that's the case, then we really aren't 100% looking at the glucose. or the glycemic index, because that's not what's creating this big surge of insulin that puts us into fat storing mode. So what does? Well, when they took the apple and they ate it and they looked at insulin secretion was like this. Okay, apple. Same amount of carbs in the processed apple juice, same amount. They took that in orally. Apple was like this. The juice that's processed was way up there, like bam. So my insulin response is much higher when the food is processed. But when the food is in its natural state, you don't get the same amount of insulin. The response is much lower when it's in its original state compared to when it's processed. And that's across the board, you guys. So if I ate chicken breasts, turkey breasts, or had a steak that's closer to like is processed, that is going to play a smaller role on insulin than if I had ground turkey, ground beef. Why? More processed. So the more processed something is, the more likely it will have a higher impact on causing you to secrete more insulin. So it's not just looking at the blood sugar, it's looking at the insulin response. And foods that are more processed have a higher insulin response, which means increased likelihood of you being in fat storage mode. Now, does that mean you never eat or have like apple juice? No, I'm not saying that. Does that mean you never eat ground turkey? I'm not saying that either. But as you are improving your gut microbiome, your overall health, and you're losing weight, the more you stick to something that's in its natural structure, the better outcome and results you're going to get. So the people like with bodybuilders, they're not eating a lot of ground turkey and ground chicken. They're eating a lot of chicken breasts and turkey breasts. They're all about the breasts, but they know something through trial and error, trial and performance by eating closer to nature, keeping it simple, less processed. Like they eat rice all the time. They eat yams and potatoes all the time, but they don't eat mashed potatoes, right? So if I eat the potato, that has one impact on me compared to the mashed potatoes. Does that mean I don't eat mashed potatoes anymore? No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying be mindful of how processed foods are or whatever it is that you are consuming, because it does play a role. So when they say eat whole, stick with whole, whenever possible, go with foods that are in their natural state. They have the structure in place. Okay, so I would rather eat an apple than drink an apple. Okay, that's it. Have a happy day. I'm Robert Ferguson, your nutritionist, fat loss coach, America's fat loss coach, loving you the most. And until the next one,